There's no doubt that you too know that the most sacred symbol in most persuasions and traditions is the mandala, the stained glass windows of the churches and the temples and the cathedrals, the wonderful Hindu depictions, the Tibetan mandalas that are created by the monks and so forth. But it's been suggested over these last days, because this sacred symbol is the symbol of wholeness, and it has been suggested over these last days with the stories that could it be, is it possible that not only do we have a mandala, a sacred crucible, but indeed that we are that mandala, that wholeness, that crucible that contains not only all the aspects of our own personal psyche, but all the sacred symbols, archetypes, numbers and characters of all the ages, meaning that we have within us the ability to understand everything, every story that's told, has been told, is told, and to be told. But in the way of stories, there's another story that asks a question of us, and the answer can only be found by diving deep into the sacred symbols and characters and archetypes. It's a story about a king who ruled fairly and well. He wasn't a particularly enlightened being, but he did serve his people in the best way he knew how. But one day it happened that he decided to go on a journey to visit the islands that are part of his territory. But as it happened, the ship met a great storm and was taken well off course and foundered. And so it happened that it was only the king and his small daughter who were washed up on a far distant shore. Now, when they were found, they no longer had any of the trappings of royalty to indicate who and what they were. They were found by a group of fishermen who took care of them for a while. But after some time, the fishermen said to the king and his young daughter, "We are poor. We can no longer give you hospitality. Perhaps if you go into the city, you will be able to find work and a livelihood." So very reluctantly, the king and his small daughter made their way into the city. But in trying to find ways to bring food to their mouths and their stomachs, everywhere they went, the king was asked, "Well, what can you do?" And the king said, "I can rain." And people would look at him and say, "What do you mean by rain?" And he would try to explain. to reign over a kingdom. But nobody understood what he was talking about. And they would ask him, well, what can you do? What is your trade? What is your talent? And he had no answer. So there was no work to be had. Wherever they went, the same question was asked, and he had to give the same answer. So they were beggars, roaming from place to place, accepting alms from those who would give, until finally they came to a farmhouse. And the farmer asked the king the same question. Well, what do you do? And he had no answer. He said, no, I don't have a talent or ability or a trade. And the farmer said, well, at least you're honest about it. Perhaps I can give you the task of caring for my sheep. And this the king and his young daughter did. And they found that they learned the ways of sheep, taking them to pasture that would give them the nourishment they needed, keeping the wolves and other predators at bay. And so in this way, although they were able to find a little abode for themselves, and they had an occupation which allowed them to sustain themselves with food. But of course, the king was never content, even though he had means of sustainability or being fed and nurturing his daughter. But it so happened that his daughter grew into a strikingly beautiful maiden. And one day, as it happened, the king of that particular realm was riding by when he espied this beautiful being. He fell in love not only with her beauty, her nobility and her graciousness. So as soon as he got back to his palace, he sent an emissary to the father of the maiden to ask for her hand in marriage. Now the king said to the emissary, "What is your king able to do? What art does he have? What talent does he have? How would he sustain my daughter?" Well, the emissary was very affronted and, of course, answered to the king, now a peasant, "Don't you know what kings do? They reign over a realm. That's what kings do." But our king insisted, "No one can marry my daughter unless they have the ability to take care of her with an art, a trade, a talent, a gift." So when the emissary went back, stating to the king that he was quite affronted by this peasant who dared to ask what his king did, but instead of being angry, the king of that realm said, "Yes, I understand what this father is saying, and I love this maiden and want her to be my wife." So immediately he took it upon himself to seek out the best weaver in the land, and from that moment on he learned the art of weaving, carpet making, And so, after he had learned this art, he took a carpet that he had woven to the father of the maiden and said, I heard that it was necessary that you would only allow your daughter to marry someone who had an art, a talent, an ability, and I put before you that which I have made. So the king, now a peasant, asked the king, how long did it take you to make this carpet? The king answered, 3 weeks. And then the king, now a peasant, asked, well, how long would the cost of this carpet sustain you if you were caring for my daughter? And the king said, at least 3 months. And so the king, now a peasant, said, yes, you can wed my daughter if she accepts your offer. And so it happened that the princess married the king of that realm, and now in the position of being the father-in-law of a king, our king was able to have the means to regain his own kingdom, where he served with great wisdom. So the question, the oblique question that arises from this story is, what is the deep meaning of this story? What does it mean? Diving deep into our crucible, our mandala that contains all the archetypes and symbols, sacred numbers and characters. What arises for us as the deep significance of this story?